Trump told a lot of lies when he was running for president, right? He said no more stupid wars, and here we are supporting Saudi Arabia in this stupid war in Yemen that has now become the world's largest humanitarian crisis, with literally tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of children starving to death as we speak. As you and I are talking right now, American bombs are being dropped on Yemen by the Saudi military, and this brutal dictator who literally crucified somebody just the other day. You speak up against his administration, you get your head cut off, or you get crucified, and this is Trump's idea of a good thing. But off on a tangent there. But anyhow, back to where we're at with Trump's promises. Trump promised that he wasn't going to get us into stupid wars. He promised that he was going to lower drug prices. He promised that he'd have a better plan for health care than Obamacare that would not be single payer or government run. Right. He promised that he was going to bring back our jobs. No, we've actually lost more jobs overseas. In fact, one of the trade agreements that he's promoting, the new NAFTA, even it was in his tax bill. Now companies can deduct up to 50% of the cost of moving jobs overseas, whereas before they couldn't, it was largely not deductible. So he's actually increased the incentives for companies to move jobs overseas. He lied about that. He's lied about pretty much everything, other than that he wants to build a wall, which is a completely ineffective, 13th century solution to a 21st century problem that, has to do with massive climate change and political dislocation in Central America that we should be helping them out with, rather than putting their people in, particularly their children, in cages in dog pounds when they come here to the United States, and then paying some private corporation that's got John Kelly on his board of directors $750 a day to keep somebody in a dog cage with no soap and no shower. I mean, and no doctors. Now they're going to court to prevent doctors from going in to see these people. This is nuts. But back to drug prices. Drug prices last year went up 500% faster than the inflation rate. They looked at 3,400 drugs. This is from a report from CBS News. So far in 2019, more than 3,400 drugs have boosted their prices an average 17%. The rate of inflation right now is a little over 1%. So why are drug prices going up, and what can we do about it? Trump is dithering about this. He's like, oh, maybe transparency. If we just list the prices of drugs, it's not that hard to find the prices. Or maybe we need more coupons. I mean, it's just, he's floundering. I've got a solution, and it's not just mine. I mean, Dean Baker actually wrote about this over at Truth Out, and I so agree with him. And by the way, this is one of the things Thomas Jefferson was ranting about in his letter to James Madison in December of 1787 rather, when he wanted a ban on commercial monopolies put into the Constitution. What he was talking about was not only the kind of monopolies where, Amazon controls the world. He was also talking about patents. And, Jefferson was a prolific inventor, as was Ben Franklin. They invented a whole lot of things that to this day we use, and yet they never patented any of them. Why? Because they didn't think it was best for the country. So why are drug prices so high? I mean, there's very few drugs that cost more than, pennies a pill to make. At the even the new really expensive drugs, the drugs that they're charging $10,000 a pill for, or $100,000 for a year's course of, like one of those cancer drugs that Louise took that literally saved her life. The actual manufactured cost of that drug is around $4 a dose. So how is it that they're charging $100,000? Well, they're saying, well, we have to charge $100,000 because we spend so much money developing drugs. Actually, what they spend so much money doing is A, advertising them on television, and B, figuring out ways to tweak an already existing drug, just slightly change the molecule so you can give it a new name and have a brand new patent, or you can call it a new version of the same drug. In other words, they're gaming the system. Why are they doing this? Again, because of patents. If you patent something, then you're the only person who can make it, unless you license somebody else with that patent. So here's the solution. Let's do away with drug patents. No more patents on drugs, period. I mean, when the guy who invented insulin back in the 1890s, or discovered a way to purify, I think it was pig insulin at the time, and make it, and use it for humans to deal with diabetes, type 1 diabetes. He gave that away. He refused to patent it because he never wanted anybody to have to pay for insulin. And now you've got people, diabetics, who are having to pay $1,500 a month for diabetes drug, for their insulin. Why? Because the companies were able to tweak very, very slightly the molecule, change it just a little bit, or even lock down the generics. This is wrong. So now, obviously, if you say we're not going to patent drugs anymore, of course, the cost of a drug is going to go down to the price of basically herbs at CVS. It's $3 a bottle for some ginkgo biloba or whatever. But you would say, well, then the drug companies don't have any incentive to develop new products. Well, to a certain extent, that's BS. You can't patent coffee, and yet there's no lack of competition in the coffee arena. You can't patent tea, but there's no lack of competition in the tea arena. You can't patent bread, but there's no lack of competition in the bread arena, and there's new companies coming along all the time. So number one, it's a BS argument. But number two, it does cost a lot of money to develop drugs. In fact, you and I, last year, through the National Institutes of Health, spent $40 billion developing new drugs, which we then gave to the drug companies for them to patent. Why do we do that? And then the drug companies themselves claim that they spent an additional $80 billion on this. Best guess, probably $5 billion of that was actually, cutting edge research. Most of it was tweaking existing things. But we're going to spend $460 billion a year this year on drugs that the true cost that in a real free market, if drugs were marketed the way that coffee is marketed or bread is marketed, or herbs are marketed, or vitamins are marketed, you can't patent vitamins. If we were to treat pharmaceuticals the same way we treated those things in terms of their ability to be patented, that $460 billion that you and I are spending on drugs would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 billion. So what about the research that the companies are doing? Well, let's have the government do all the research or fund all the research. It's fine. The drug companies can apply for government grants to do research, and then the government can say, no, we're not going to give you a grant to tweak Xanax so you can turn it into Zanz, a brand new drug, so you can keep the price super high, or make a new version of an already existing quinolone antibiotic. We're not going to pay for that. But if you want to figure out a new drug that's actually going to deal with something like Parkinson's or going to deal with something like Alzheimer's, yeah, we will fund that. And we will continue to fund it through universities. So let's separate the money making from the research making by doing away with patents on drugs, by simply declaring, and we can do this legislatively, that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness includes the right to have pharmaceuticals that actually work, that you can actually afford, and therefore pharmaceuticals are no longer patentable, and we're going to subsidize the development of new pharmaceuticals, both in the public sector and in the private sector. And you would see drug prices drop to 10% of what they are today, maybe 20% at the most. And suddenly, people would not have to be cutting back on their insulin and dying. I mean, literally, people are dying right now because they're cutting their pills in half, because they're cutting their insulin doses down to the point where they're ending up with gangrene.